yeah, it was a big challenge for me. Um, First of all, to act in a film, because I was trained at all, and also writing film music was a big challenge. Um, I didn't have enough knowledge and techniques. But at the same time, it was big fun. Maybe because uh, that was something very different from what I was doing at that time. You know, always new things are big challenge and also fun. The very first thing I did was to make a long list of pieces of music about where they should go, they should place in the film. So I wrote my own list and showed it to Mr. Oshima, and he got his own list. And two lists matched maybe 98%. So I was really surprised, and I thought I could trust my instinct, the inspiration for the main theme. Once the main theme was approved by the director, I went on writing sub-themes. In other words, the leitmotifs for the several important relationships between the characters, let's say Captain Yonoi and David Bowie, or Mr. Lawrence and Bit Takeshi, you know, so on. It took me 3 months working in the studio. Mr. Oshima came to the studio to listen to what I was doing only once in the 3 months. To make the, let's say, vocal version or pop version of the main theme was entirely from me. So I didn't have any pressure for that. Well, I really wanted to work with David Bowie, so I asked him to sing on this, but he didn't want to. He said that he wanted to focus on this project just as an actor, purely as an actor. And I understood. So then I asked another my friend, David Sylvian, to work on this, and he said yes. He did it beautifully. We all liked the result. And it was a big thing for him and for me, as you know. Maybe since I was 15 or 16, I had been a big fan of Mr. Oshima. Probably I saw most of his films. So, he was a hero. Then one day I got a phone call from him, and he came over to my office with a copy of the script. I still couldn't believe that. Yes, I had an interest in East meets West because maybe before this film I was doing this band, the Yellow Magic Orchestra, and I thought the band broke some kind of border between East and West. So this subject is very realistic to me at that time, still now. But this story is about also two individual men, and their love. So it's not about the two regions of the planet, but it's also two individual men. So it's very broad, and that's what I was interested so much. Obviously, I try to reflect my interest and also the subject onto
tus
the music I
trailers.
was writing.
Visita mi canal.
So it's not simple to just put east part and west part and put them together. It's not like that. The music I wanted to write was something very far from both west and east, as if it comes from nowhere. In other words, it must sound very nostalgic, at the same time very exotic for both Western people and Eastern people, Asians. It wasn't easy. Even though I tried very hard for acting in this film, but when I saw the first rough cut, I just fainted. I couldn't believe how bad my acting was. So since then, I was traumatized. It was impossible for me to seek the career as an actor. It was impossible.
Tus trailers. Visita mi canal.
I was surprised that he seemed just a regular person throughout the shooting. Then when we reunited and in Cannes for the festival, he behaved like a superstar, and I was so surprised by this change. He is a superstar, and he probably controls different masks, different characters. I can't. I simply cannot do that. I'm just a musician, and he has many aspects. Unbelievable. I really admire him because I cannot do that. I still can see how big this impact of the experience for him being involved in this film on him to become a very successful film director. I feel privileged to eyewitness his, growth, and I'm very happy, he has been recognized as a great film director, especially in Europe. I still believe Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence triggered him a lot. Well, everybody was very happy to reunite. I was more than happy he didn't forget me. So I tried my best for him for the second time. And the good thing was he didn't ask me to act this time.
It was shot in the Cook Islands in Rarotonga, which is it turned out within the New Zealand Protectorate, therefore I could use New Zealand tax funds and shoot the film in Rarotonga, which in fact was ideal. Yeah. Place where there was an airport which would take a jumbo jet and was on a route that you could fly via New Zealand to Los Angeles via Rarotonga, believe it. Not anymore. At that time, you could do that. So we chose that place. We researched the film to shoot it possibly in Okinawa because of the Japanese crew, and then we thought about filming in the real places. And we ended up there. Very happy with that. And I had a fantastic recce with Oshima. We went from many places looking to where to shoot this film. Also, some of the film is set in not in it's meant to be set back in England. And so we shot the scenes in New Zealand, which look a bit strange. The foliage looks a bit strange, but that was the UK farm. And then we also shot Java itself in Auckland, in the buildings which had similar architecture to the train station and things like that. So the mix of the film was shot in Rarotonga and Auckland. They were making films there, but there certainly was no film industry there, and the Lord of the Rings hadn't opened the country to incredible filmmaking, and all the facilities weren't there. We had to bring everything, which virtually everything we used, we had to bring, and certainly everything to Rarotonga was taken by either by ship. There's not a proper port there; it had to be shipped, and then go in by in a lighter, to off a cargo boat, and then taken into the port because you couldn't get it. There's nowhere for a big boat there because there's a coral reef around the island. That's all we had to prepare. We built the sets, and the prisoner of war camp was built in a valley there. And I suppose we were there about 6 or 7 weeks beforehand. And I think we were there 6 or 7 weeks in Rarotonga. It was a fantastic experience for everybody. I'd made Eureka before that, which was a film with Nick Rogue, which was a big film shot on location. And of course, my first film I ever made, Mad Dog, was shot in Australia in the bush, and so I was from London, so that sort of was a location shot in the desert. So the second film I made was shot in the West Country, and then the next film was shot in another exotic location, was shot in Europe. So Europe and Morocco. So I'd made films in. I'd already had the sort of the treatment of international filmmaking, and I wasn't scared of taking a film unit, which was a challenge, taking a Japanese film crew with partly English, maybe 75% Japanese film crew and 25% English speaking, maybe New Zealanders and some British people, to make the film. It was, you know, initially one of the elements was sort of coming together of those two cultures to make a film, which was something interesting in the film itself, because the film was about prisoners of war and people from different cultures who didn't speak the same language trying to interact together in a way, and that was something which was added a certain sort of interest to the film. It's a film of obsession and passion and of love and codes of honor, and of course it has the story of the prison war camp, of catching the prisoner and the prisoner not breaking and the prisoner but dying, and you know, the relationship with the captors and the captives. So that is all which you've seen in many prison war camp films. So I didn't do it to make a prison war camp film, but as a setting for a film, it was a fabulous setting for a film, and a film that we've seen but never seen like that, and probably will never see again a prison war camp film done like that, with a sort of heart of you know, a love of a man loving another man because he's so perfect, you know, and Yonoi, the Sakamoto character, loved things to be just perfect. You know, he was like a, you know, absolutely archetypal, perfect Japanese samurai. You know, he was a samurai. He was an aristocrat, put in a prison war camp. He didn't like it at all. And there was an incident in the film, there's some dialogue in the film when he explains, which is lost on a Western audience, but he mentions an incident of why he was there when he had Tom Conti talking inside the church. Tom Conti said, "So you were one of those of the golden ones who was in 1934. That's why you're here." So, and that was something which we didn't really put in perfectly, because, you know, to explain it more than that would have been a whole sequence to explain what it was. And I, you know, it was a debate when the film was in the film. I said, "Well, it doesn't mean anything to us." But, you know, Oshima said, "Well, it means something to a few people. Will understand maybe why he's there. This person who's so perfect." And then he saw the David Bowie character as some sort of god. You know, he saw him as something perfect creature and something that was something very, very special. And he couldn't. I mean, in fact, it was something too much for him. Well, I was already a big fan of Oshima's films, because it's the area of cinema that I was interested in, and I've been working in already. And I met Oshima at the Cannes, the year of the Chat won the Grand Prix de Jury. It was the second film I made, and I sat next to him at the prize-giving dinner. And then 2 or 3 years later, he sent me the script with, you know, to remember our meeting. In fact, a friend of mine, there was a friend of mine in London, Michio. She knew Oshima as well, and she brought the script and gave it to me. And I read it and thought, well, you know, A, I'd love to make a film on Oshima. B, I'd love to make a film about a prison war camp, which is made by a Japanese director like that, with a story like this, written by Sir Lawrence van der Post. It was, you know, irresistible to me when I read the book. And Oshima had already wanted to put Sakamoto and Kitano in the film. And Bowie was, you know, on the cards of, you know, somebody who he was already thinking about, which I was, you know, incredibly excited that immediately I thought that could be. Other people had been considered for, which I won't even talk about, it's so ridiculous, to play Celiers, JC, Jesus Christ. You know, it's a very, you know, he's a symbolic character. He sacrifices himself. You know, he's, you know, it's an extraordinary part, and he has an extraordinary ending. He has an extraordinary ending in the film, that character. So the whole project was, you know, just for me, and I wasn't scared of going to make it there with them. The first meeting I had in Tokyo after I got that, I went there. I was never been to Japan before. That was maybe a moment of a slight amount of nerves, because I was, you know, alone there at that time. As soon as we started building up the relationship over the next couple of years before we made the movie, and then started searching and finding the various resources to make the film, and it was a fantastic growing experience for me, and then training for future films I'd make in sort of these places, and how to make a film in these sort of places. He is a very, again, a very special person, and he, between the time I met him, he virtually learned to speak English fluently. Between the time I met him and in the year and a half before we, you know, when I met him in Japan and we started shooting the movie, or however long it was, he learned to speak enough English to direct the actors properly. You know. in English, which was a big challenge. And you know, I can't see that if I was going to do the same thing, I'd learn speaking Japanese enough at the age he was. So that was something which was amazing. And of course, he shoots in a different way. A Japanese director shoots very differently from a European or an American director. And I'd never seen a filmmaker shoot like Oshima, because his shooting ratio is normally a director would shoot maybe even 5 or 10 takes. And when you're finished shooting a film, you'd have a 10 or 15 or 20 times the material you needed to edit down. 10 to 1 ratio, 15 to 1, 20 to 1, 30 to 1 ratio is not unusual on a movie. And Oshima would be shooting maybe a 2 to 1 ratio. So he would maybe even stop on one take. He'd do a take and say, okay, let's move on. And I would be completely, I was going, why don't you do it again? Because it was right. I liked it. It was done. And there was no video playback in that then. Today the film is played. The director's watching this back through a video playback. We had no video playback, and then also the rushes were not sent back for something like 3 weeks. So his incredible confidence as a filmmaker. He was just making a movie. There's nothing. Just making a film. And it was particularly shown up, this incident, when there's a scene in Merry Christmas when there's a lot of prisoners of war gathered together, and there's a conflict between the Sakamoto character and the Bowie character, and that is a lot of people there. And we had to fly up the people from Auckland in a jumbo, which I think is 350 people who were sort of very skinny, or amputees, or people who looked like prisoner of war, all those skinny people. And when we got there, and I went away from the set to go back to the production office, and I came back and he'd wrapped the set. And I said, but Nagi said, we've got 350 people here. He said, I've finished. Well, you want me to waste film stock? And he had shot what we had catered for like a day by before lunch, and that was wrapped. And so he's very unlike other people, because he didn't want more. He only wanted, he just wanted only two pieces, or that's all he wanted, and then the rest was completely surplus. And he couldn't understand when I debated with him, well, why didn't you shoot more? You might get a better reaction. I don't need any more. I've got what I want. And then the next time I encountered that was when I worked with Kitano on Brother. I saw him do he was shooting with a very, very, he didn't want extra. He just wanted what he wanted, and that's very unusual.
Do you think he learned that style from Oshima?
I think that he, obviously Oshima was the first director who directed him in film, and Oshima is a great master and an inspirational character, and Kitano worked with him again in another film I did with Oshima, Gohato, and seeing, I suppose it is an influence. And the Japanese cinema tradition was a little film stock. That was a tradition from the Shoshiku studios and the other Toho studios, was a little film stock, to make films with, because film stock is very expensive. Laboratories have to process it, has to be shipped, it has to be then edited, it has to be, so it's the idea of compact and precise is important.
It keeps the budget down, as you mentioned there, which is quite good for a producer.
Well, it keeps the budget down. It kept the budget down very marginally, because we're left with. In fact, I bought the 60,000 feet of film stock, or however many I thought initial film stock. I was left with half of it. Nobody wants to buy film stock once it's been to a desert island and back, because it might have got hot, and so it was. In fact, it was a terrible waste of money. Well, I think Bowie is a performer, and having worked with Nick Rowe before, and myself, and heard from him things saying how he really liked casting musicians who are performers in films, and had done it with Bowie, and had done it with Mick Jagger, and had done it in the film I did with him, Bad Timing, which I'd done before Merry Christmas. So I already, had seen that the interaction was very interesting and very good. And then Bowie is extremely cultivated and knows everything about Oshima, and it was, once he understood that Oshima was interested in him, Bowie was interested in that, because it was something that was very, very interesting for him. The whole idea of the thing was, he's a sort of person who was stimulated by that. And, I'm sure he gets asked to do things all the time, but a film like that, a role like that with Oshima and Sakamoto and all those things, was like, it was an ideal situation for his involvement, and he was immediately on. Yeah, I'd love to do it. I'm there. Tell me when I'll be there. And he was wonderful to work with, and I think he had a fabulous experience during the making of that. I think it was something that he would say is one of the happiest moments anybody ever spent, because it was we had a sort of idyllic few weeks on this island making this film. He's such a brilliant man and such a wonderful actor, and also somebody who's an incredible mimic and memory, that he memorized that in Japanese, which is so perfect that a Japanese man thinks he speaks fluent Japanese, and he didn't speak any, and he also intonated in the correct way and emoted the film in a language he had no idea what he was talking about, and he was completely confused because he was just talking like a parrot fashion, but he was so good at putting the intonation if you really believed he spoke the language, and that every Japanese who saw the film thought, well, Mr. Conti speaks English. And so when Tom went to do promotion in Japan, they couldn't believe that he didn't speak English, he didn't speak fluent Japanese. I knew that he was, again, somebody of unbelievable creative qualities and made incredible music, and I knew that he was going to do the music, although he had never done any music for film. And Oshima, the character of Yonoi, which was played by Sakamoto, is a very particular character, very sort of certain type of person. And Oshima said to him, I want you to compose a score from the head of Yonoi, which I thought was a brilliant thing. And out came this score, which was, which he continued saying to Sakamoto, you're Yonoi when you make this score. And that was very good. It was my first film that I could actually say was a bona fide hit. It caught the public's imagination in most places, to a certain extent, and it was shown all over the world and sold all over the world and continues to be played all over the world. And it's sort of it's a film that's some people's favourite, and it has aged very well. It hasn't, because it was set in period. And Bowie somehow miraculously doesn't look any older today than he did then. The film looks very current. Well, the abiding memory, of course, is the whole incident. The whole affair was so strong, and such a wonderful time to spend literally making a film on an island with a happy band of people. It was that was very special. But then the individual incidents were so much and varied. But I remember one day, as we were filming a scene of Harikiri, when somebody's head had to be chopped off after they'd disemboweled themselves, which is a pretty tough sort of scene, the DOP got so angry with the actor, the director of photography, he grabbed the sword and said it should be done like this, and he just got this dummy's head off in a slice, And I said to somebody, how does he know how to do that? And he said, he was in the Second World War doing that, And I looked at this 75-year-old director of photography and suddenly realized, he was on the set, and he was somebody who was, at war with British soldiers in Asia, and it was that was an extraordinary event. I mean, I suddenly realized this man had his skill and expertise with a sword, just like a swordsman.
Did you behave yourself after that?
I certainly didn't ever question his timesheet. I'm in a different world to Hollywood, I interact with the so-called world of Hollywood with my films, but they're not coming from there, getting to the audience with a different value judgments. So they want to be popular, but I want them to be something else as well. And as I'm able still to do that, I'm still trying to do that now, to find films that are more interesting to me, and because there's a very wide taste out there, and I'm trying to find a place with my films that certain people who like certain sort of films, and not everybody likes this sort of film. So the films that are made for mass popularity, which after all most films are made for mass popularity, they are they won't challenge some ideas or won't discuss things because people are frightened that they are become too difficult for films, but I'm not. That's my challenge.